The morning in Greenwich began with its usual tranquility. Catherine Morrison was preparing Sunday breakfast, basking in the sunlight streaming through the large windows. The table was set with dishes made from carefully selected fresh ingredients from Whole Foods, French toast perfumed with maple syrup, organic yogurt topped with seasonal berries, and freshly ground aromatic coffee. This ritual had remained unchanged throughout their decade of marriage. "David, coffee's ready." Responding to her call, her husband David came down the stairs. Though he carried the heavy responsibility of marketing director at Harrison & Global, he always set aside Sundays to spend time with family, or at least, that's how it appeared. Dressed in a Brooks Brothers cashmere sweater, he was the epitome of a successful businessman. "Thank you, Kat." He kissed her cheek and took his usual seat. Outside the window, the Greenwich streetscape was shrouded in morning mist. Today was their weekly family dinner day. In the evening, her sister April and their parents would gather. After service at First Presbyterian Church, gathering around Catherine's home-cooked meal had been a long-standing family tradition. From appetizers to desserts, her commitment to making everything from scratch had always delighted the family's palate. April had found success as an influencer with 500,000 followers. Her Instagram featured posts of her glamorous life in a luxury Manhattan apartment, drawing envy from her followers. Hermes Birkin bags, Cartier jewelry, and the latest Gucci collections, her posts were always at the cutting edge of trends. Their parents, George and Mary Parker, were known as a prominent Greenwich family. As key members of First Presbyterian Church and regulars at the Greenwich Country Club, they wielded considerable social influence, hosting local charity events. George's deep baritone shone in the Sunday choir, while Mary played a central role in the Church Women's Association. The Parker family mansion, situated in an upscale residential area, preserved the traditions of old New England. In the well-maintained garden, roses that Mary carefully tended bloomed proudly, and neighborhood children would visit on holidays, looking forward to grandmother's homemade cookies. Catherine was a sharp consultant earning over $300,000 annually as a senior partner at an accounting consulting firm. She balanced a successful career with a happy home life while volunteering at the church's Sunday school. She was known as the perfect woman who never failed to meet expectations, both at work and at home. Social media was filled with photos of their European vacations and warm family dinners, drawing envy as the ideal family. Catherine's Instagram documented countless precious memories: family trips to Paris, wine tasting in Tuscany, ski holidays in the Alps. The bond between the Morrison and Parker families was admired in both church communities and charity events. "Tonight's dinner is pork roast provençal," Catherine informed her husband. "April's favorite. I picked out a nice wine yesterday too." David smiled and nodded. "Your cooking is always the best." After breakfast, David headed to his study. Catherine watched his retreating back as she began preparing for dinner. The changes began around the end of spring. David's return time gradually grew later. The phrase, "new project in the Asia-Pacific region," became frequently heard during dinner conversations. Catherine often caught sight of her husband checking emails intently in his study late at night. His profile, illuminated by the pale monitor light, showed traces of what seemed like anxiety. When she asked, "Are you all right?" the only response was, "Oh, it's just the time zone difference." The words, "You should get some rest too," that used to always follow were no longer heard recently. However, other changes were also steadily progressing. A new Patek Philippe gleamed on David's right wrist. Though he explained it as a token of appreciation from a client, Catherine knew her husband wasn't the type to be interested in Swiss luxury watches. The timepiece seemed to suit someone else's wrist entirely. The closet began filling with suits of younger, more fashionable designs, distinctly different from his usual Brooks Brothers style. Tom Ford, Saint Laurent, and Dior, all brands he had never given a second glance to before. David started going to the gym, drinking protein shakes, and canceling his weekend golf games. "I'm just trying to take better care of my health." Catherine felt something off about her husband's profile as he said this. It seemed like changes made to be shown to someone. His choice of cologne changed too, and sometimes after office meetings, there would be faint traces of foundation on his shirt collar. Meanwhile, April also began showing unusual behavior. Sudden cancellations of weekly family dinners increased. "I have an important brand event," or "there's an emergency influencer meeting." Such excuses would arrive by message. However, there were often no new posts on social media on those same days. The frequency of her social media posts had clearly decreased. Instead of scenes from glamorous parties or selfies in the latest fashion, posts of quiet time spent at her parents' home increased. All of them seemed to carry somewhat artificial atmospheres. "Mom and Dad haven't been feeling well lately. I want to spend more time at home." April's eyes seemed to slightly avoid Catherine's gaze as she spoke these words. When visiting on weekends, their parents appeared perfectly healthy. If anything, they seemed more energetic than usual. Credit card statements showed records of even more expensive purchases than before. Hermès, Cartier, Tiffany. Each time she saw these brand names, Catherine couldn't help but wonder how much support their parents were providing to sustain April's lifestyle. Her sister's influence on Instagram was clearly beginning to wane. And to make matters worse, April's presence at church became increasingly rare. She was no longer seen at Sunday services, let alone charity events. Though their parents made excuses saying, "She's busy with work," their voices carried an unnatural urgency. Then came the decisive event. It's for launching a new project in Hawaii. David announced a 2-week business trip. Her husband, who usually packed minimally, had specially purchased a new suitcase this time. The latest Louis Vuitton model. He had even tucked away a flashy Aloha shirt in the suitcase, as if heading to a luxury resort in Hawaii. "Don't worry. I'll be back soon." Catherine couldn't help but sense something off about her husband's unusually polite tone as he bid farewell. His attitude seemed almost guilty. His footsteps on the doormat even carried a slight spring. That day, a message arrived from April. "I'll be busy for a while. There's a new business opportunity. Mom and Dad are going to help too." Catherine read the message over and over. Then, she decided to thoroughly check her sister's social media accounts, something she never usually did. Her husband's business trip announcement, her sister's sudden busyness, and their parents' involvement. These were beginning to connect in an ominous way. The discovery of the backup account was accidental. A private account with few followers and modest posts. However, the photos posted there froze Catherine's heart. Family photos at a luxury resort in Waikiki. Breakfast scenes at the Moana Surfrider. Lavish dinners at La Mer. David and her parents smiling happily. And April's figure. Her sister was clinging to Catherine's husband like a lover. With trembling hands, she opened the airline mileage confirmation screen. First-class airline tickets for 4 people, accumulated over many years. Hawaii flight reservation records. Luxury hotel confirmation emails. Everything had been paid for from her account. The betrayal had even fed on her assets. Catherine turned off the computer. Outside the window, dusk was approaching. She stood up and quietly walked to the closet. Taking out a suitcase, she began packing the bare essentials. 1 suit, identification documents, and the collection of evidence she had gathered over the years. Her expression no longer showed any trace of agitation. Only quiet determination remained. She opened the airline app and made a reservation. Time to match their return flight. The revenge had to be perfect. "I'll be the one to welcome you home," Catherine whispered softly in the darkened room. Manhattan's high-rise district. Catherine's figure was reflected in the glass-walled office. "Mrs. Morrison, we've been expecting you." James Sterling, one of the nation's top divorce attorneys, greeted her in the top-floor reception room. The New York skyline spread out beyond the windows. "Could you tell me more about your case?" Catherine carefully took out the evidence she had prepared, one piece at a time. USB drives, printed photographs, flight reservation records, and credit card statements. Impressive evidence collection, Sterling reviewed the materials with admiration. The social media records, in particular, are perfect. "For the first time in our 10-year marriage, I suspected my husband's betrayal," Catherine's voice maintained its composure. "But I never imagined my sister and parents would be involved." Sterling nodded quietly. "Let's start by protecting your assets." From that day, meticulous legal preparations began. The first step was strengthening control over bank accounts. Moving funds from joint accounts and opening new individual accounts. Investment assets were also moved beyond her husband's reach. Confirming property rights was also urgent. The Greenwich home was inherited from Catherine's paternal grandfather. It could be claimed as premarital property with full ownership rights. "Prepare to freeze all credit cards," Sterling instructed. But let's wait until the last moment for timing. Evidence collection continued even more thoroughly. IT specialists were hired to preserve digital evidence. Social media posts, email exchanges, location records. Everything was saved in a form that couldn't be tampered with. "Here's material obtained from Harrison and Global's accounting department," Sterling's assistant brought in a new file. "We found serious irregularities in David Morrison's expense claims. Fictitious business trip expenses, inflated entertainment costs, and personal shopping processed as expenses. The amounts ran into 6 figures. We've also obtained April Parker's financial records," the IT specialist reported. "Over $5 million in debt confirmed in the past 6 months. Seems to be due to drastically reduced income following declining social media influence." Catherine checked her sister's social media accounts again. Follower numbers showed a sharp declining trend, and sponsor contract renewals were in jeopardy. Contracts with luxury brands were quietly being terminated. "I'm concerned about our parents' financial situation too," Catherine quietly stated. The investigation results were even more shocking. The Greenwich mansion already had substantial liens placed on it. Country club membership fees were 3 months in arrears. Church donations had recently stopped. Perfect preparation requires allies, Sterling said. The first contact was with Harrison and Global's CEO. Mrs. Morrison, I understand the situation, CEO Thomas Hamilton stated with a serious expression. David Morrison's actions are a major compliance issue for our company. Next was HR Director Janet Smith. His promotion will be frozen immediately. We're also preparing the disciplinary committee. Key clients in the Asia-Pacific region were also discreetly informed of the situation. Many of them trusted Catherine's expertise as an accounting consultant. Contact with April's connections was also carefully managed. This is an issue affecting our brand image, a luxury brand representative stated. We're already prepared for contract termination. The advertising agency director agreed. Her influence can no longer be counted on. We were waiting for a new development. Quiet ripples spread through the church community as well. Mr. and Mrs. Parker's actions go against our values, the pastor said sadly. The church committee is prepared to take appropriate measures. Finally, preparation for media response. However, we'd like to avoid sensational coverage, Sterling carefully advised. Yes, I understand, Catherine answered quietly. But definite social sanctions are necessary. Selected evidence photos were prepared for local media reporters. As the most effective sanction against families who value their social standing in upper society. And the final touch. Careful preparations began for the confrontation at the airport. Coordination with security, monitor placement, appropriate positioning of involved parties. Everything proceeded under a perfect plan. 72 hours before scheduled arrival time, Sterling made the final confirmation. Madam, are you sure about this method? Catherine answered while gazing out the window. Yes. This is how betrayal must be repaid. In the Manhattan twilight, the final preparations continued. Airport arrival lobby. Catherine was dressed in a pure white Alexander McQueen suit with perfect makeup. In her hands, a bouquet of deep red roses. They were the same variety she had carried at her wedding 10 years ago. Many people were already positioned in the arrival lobby. On the left side, Harrison and Global's executives. CEO Thomas Hamilton stood with a stern expression, arms crossed. Beside him, Sales Director James Walker conversed quietly with 3 important clients from the Asia-Pacific region. Next to them stood HR Director Janet Smith. In her hands were documents for disciplinary dismissal. On the right side, April's work contacts. The Chanel brand representative watched the arrival gate with a cold expression. Next to them were representatives from Gucci and Hermes. They held contract termination notices in their hands. The advertising agency's creative director was already browsing photos of the next campaign model on his smartphone. In the center rear, First Presbyterian Church representatives. Pastor Jonathan Williams wore a sad expression. Church committee members also sighed deeply, repeating words of prayer. And Greenwich Country Club members. These longtime acquaintances showed in their expressions the pain of having to witness this day. Flight information was displayed on the arrival lobby's large monitors. Catherine made one final check. Attorney James Sterling reviewed documents while quietly stating, "All preparations are complete. When the clock struck 4, an announcement played. HA 382 will be arriving shortly. Catherine took a deep breath and straightened her back further. 15 minutes later, the automatic doors opened and passengers began appearing. April's voice could be heard. She was carrying a new Hermes Birkin. It really was a wonderful vacation. Mary Parker's voice. She held luxury brand shopping bags in both hands. I hope we can go again next month. George Parker followed, pulling a golf bag. Yes, let's consider a different resort next time. David's voice. A new Patek Philippe gleamed on his wrist. The four walked along with beaming smiles. Then suddenly, their expressions froze. Catherine approached, holding the bouquet. Welcome back, everyone. Her voice was unnaturally calm. The blood drained from David's face. April clutched her Birkin to her chest. Her parents stood speechless. Catherine slowly turned her gaze to the monitor. The large screen lit up. Shall we start with the timeline? The first footage began playing. Last year's Christmas party. David and April meeting secretly, away from prying eyes. December 24th last year. While I was delayed at work. Catherine's voice rang cold. Next came security camera footage from a luxury hotel. Images of the two checking in at different times. Scenes of their rendezvous at restaurants. Everything was meticulously recorded. April. I hear you have $5 million in debt. Catherine turned to face her sister. Is that why you approached him? Desperate because your brand contracts were about to expire? The monitor displayed evidence documents of April's debts. Emails showing the crisis of contract renewals. Multiple payment default notices. And a graph showing rapidly declining follower numbers. April's face turned pale. Catherine turned to face her husband. Was the pressure of the promotion race hard? A midlife crisis-seeking youth? Now internal emails and personnel evaluation documents were displayed. Evidence of fraudulent use of expenses. Fictitious business trip records. Inflated entertainment expense statements. David staggered and leaned against the wall. And the greatest betrayers. Catherine faced her parents. Why did you help their affair? Did you intend to trample my life this far? CEO Thomas Hamilton stepped forward. David Morrison. I pronounce your dismissal. The Asia-Pacific region clients followed. We will terminate all contracts immediately. The HR director thrust documents forward. Disciplinary dismissal. No retirement benefits. Next, the brand representatives turned to April. Contract termination is effective today. Future engagement is completely impossible. There is no prospect of image recovery. The pastor sadly informed the parents. Expulsion from the church committee is already decided. Country club members continued. The recommendation for withdrawal was unanimously approved. Cold voices were thrown from the charity committee as well. All hosting rights will be revoked. The blood had completely drained from all four faces. David collapsed to his knees, April broke down crying, and her parents stood dumbfounded. At that moment, local media photographers simultaneously fired their flashes to capture the decisive moment of upper society scandal for tomorrow's morning papers. Catherine slowly threw down the bouquet. Deep red roses scattered on the airport floor as the hem of her white suit swayed elegantly. "This is the price for betraying me." Catherine walked away magnificently. Behind her remained only the shattered remnants of a ruined family and rose petals scattered across the floor. 1 year later, Catherine gazed out from her office on the 57th floor. On her desk sat the 2024 Outstanding Accountant Award plaque. It told the story of her new life's trajectory that began with that day at the airport. David's fall was precipitous. After his disciplinary dismissal from Harrison and Global, he couldn't find new employment. Word of his fraudulent expense claims spread throughout the industry, and no company was willing to risk hiring him. Ordered to pay substantial alimony, he had to give up his luxury Manhattan apartment. Word has it he now lives in an old apartment in the Bronx, scraping by as a temporary worker. Mr. David Morrison? When her secretary inquired, Catherine quietly shook her head. "He's no longer relevant to my life." April's downfall was equally severe. Her social media influence completely vanished, with follower counts dropping below 100,000. Luxury brand contracts were terminated one after another, with no new sponsors emerging. Rumors say she moved from her luxury Manhattan apartment to a shared house in Brooklyn. Her once glamorous lifestyle had completely collapsed. Ms. April is seeking reconciliation. When contacted by the lawyer, Catherine calmly replied, "Not necessary." Her parents' fate was even more tragic. Expulsion from the church community. Complete exclusion from social circles. They were forced to disappear from charity activities as well. The Greenwich mansion was sold to repay debts. They now reportedly live on a modest pension in a small Connecticut town. "A letter has arrived from your mother." When the secretary informed her, Catherine silently took the documents and fed them through the shredder. However, Catherine's own life had gained new brilliance. After the airport incident, she moved to Manhattan's Upper East Side. She established a new accounting consulting firm, and her expertise was valued even more than before. Parker Consulting had become known as Wall Street's most trusted accounting firm. She also established a solid presence in her new community. Activities at Central Park Church. Scholarship support for children. Donations to environmental protection organizations. Everything spoke of her new way of life. "Would you like to write a book about that incident?" She politely declined the publisher's offer. Let the past remain in the past. On holidays, she enjoys jogging in Central Park and spending quiet time at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Sometimes, she takes in a Broadway musical. Above all, she had regained her peace of mind. "Are you happy?" When asked by a close friend, Catherine showed a gentle smile. Yes, perhaps for the first time, in the true sense of the word. Her desk calendar was filled with next month's schedule. Opening of the London branch. International Accounting Symposium in Paris. And a vacation in Milan. "Ms. Parker, it's time for the board meeting." At her secretary's call, Catherine rose gracefully. Outside the window, Manhattan was being painted in twilight colors. The lights of the skyscrapers were beginning to shine one by one. The betrayers of the past were each spending their days in regret in their respective places. But for Catherine, life was just beginning its main act. Please prepare the materials for the new project. As she walked briskly toward the conference room, there were no longer any shadows of the past visible on her back. The full moon floated in Manhattan's night sky, glittering with city lights. It seemed to herald the beginning of a new story. Tomorrow again, Catherine Parker would continue walking toward new heights. This time, without fear of anyone's betrayal.